Welcome back to Horrors Worldwide. Today I'm going to explain an American psychological horror thriller film called Psycho, released in 1960. Spoilers ahead! Watch out and stay safe. The film starts in a hotel room on a Friday afternoon. Marion Crane and her out-of-town lover, Sam Loomis, end a lunchtime interlude with yet another disagreement about their future. Marion wants to marry Sam, but debts inherited from his father and his own alimony payments do not leave him enough money to support her as he would like. Marion returns to the real estate office where she works as a secretary and meets a client, Cassidy, who buys a house from her boss, Lowery, with $40,000 in cash. Lowery tells Marion to put the money in the safe deposit box at the bank until Monday, but Marion doesn't go to the bank. On the spur of the moment, she decides to keep the money, packs a suitcase, and starts driving out of town. On her way, Lowery spots her in the car and suspiciously looks at her. Worried that she has been found out already, Marion still proceeds out of town to Fairvale, California, where Sam lives. In the morning, a highway patrolman stops to investigate her stopped car and awakens her. Startled and nervous, she arouses the patrolman's suspicions. After looking at her license and registration, the patrolman allows her to go on but follows her for a while, which intensifies Marion's agitation. Realizing that her car can easily give her away, Marion buys a new car, and the patrolman following her notices all this from across the street. As night falls on this second day, with her fears of pursuit crowding in around her, she drives into a rainstorm. Unable to see the road clearly, Marion spots the lighted sign of the Bates Motel and decides to take a room for the night. Scared of being tracked by the police, Marion registers under a false name, and the motel owner, Norman, checks her into cabin 1, just next to the office. When she asks about food, Marion learns that Fairvale is only 15 miles away, but Norman offers to share his supper with her so she doesn't have to go out again in the rain, and he goes back to the house. She then overhears a shouted argument between Norman and his mother coming from the house near the motel. Mother Bates seems to have a low opinion of young women and doesn't want Norman associating with them. Norman returns to the motel with sandwiches and milk and invites Marion to join him in the parlor just behind the check-in desk. In their conversation over sandwiches, Norman talks about being trapped, just as Marion presently feels trapped by her recent hasty decision. But Norman is more permanently trapped in his coexistence with his mother and her madness. Taking Norman's situation as a cautionary tale, Marion decides to return to Phoenix to make amends and try to pull herself out of the trap she's gotten herself into before it's too late. When Marion goes back to her room, Norman takes down a framed picture from the wall and looks through a peephole where he can watch Marion changing. With a new burst of intensity, Norman hurries up the hill and goes into the house. In her room, Marion sits in a robe and calculates some figures, working out how she can repay the $700 she has already spent on the car. She then tears up the paper containing the figures and flushes the pieces down the toilet. With newfound peace of mind, she slips out of her robe and slippers and steps into the tub to enjoy a cleansing shower. Behind her, a figure approaches and pulls back the shower curtain. It is the shadowy figure of an old woman wielding a large kitchen knife. Marion screams seeing that, but the blade lifts high into the air and then strikes and strikes again and again. The savage attack continues, and then her killer leaves. Marion falls over the edge of the tub and the shower continues to run over her as her blood flows down the tub drain. From the house, Norman's voice yells out in shock, asking his mother,
"Oh God, Mother! Blood!"
He quickly cleans up the murder scene by wrapping Marion's body in the shower curtain and places her in the trunk of her car and gathers her belongings into the trunk as well and drives to a swamp near the motel, where he pushes the car in and watches it slowly disappear in the dark bog. 1 week later, Sam Loomis is sitting in the back office of his hardware store in Fairvale, writing a note to Marion. He has changed his mind, and if it's not too late, he wants to marry her right away, even if his finances are limited right now. Marion's sister, Lila Crane, comes into the store and asks if Marion is there. Sam tells her she isn't. As they are talking, a private investigator named Arbogast also enters the store and asks for Marion's whereabouts. His interest is in recovering the stolen $40,000, which Lila knew about, but Sam did not. Arbogast is convinced that Marion is somewhere in this town close to her boyfriend, so he sets out on a search of hotels and boarding houses around Fairvale to track her down. When Arbogast gets to the Bates Motel, Norman tells him he hasn't seen Marion and that there haven't been any guests in weeks. But Arbogast looks at the register and asks about the false signature in Marion's handwriting. Realizing that lying was a mistake, Norman admits to remembering her now and says she stayed that Saturday night and left early on Sunday morning. Arbogast spots Mother's silhouette sitting at the window of the house and asks to meet her, but Norman refuses, saying that his mother doesn't like being disturbed. When Norman tells him about what his mother said about Marion, Arbogast becomes determined to talk to her, but Norman insists that he leave. Arbogast phones Lila to tell them that Marion had registered the previous Saturday night at the Bates Motel, and the manager in the motel is hiding something. When he gets back to the motel, Arbogast looks into the office and the parlor briefly to see if Norman is there. When he doesn't find Norman there, he heads up to the house and goes inside. Sensing that no one is downstairs, he starts up the stairs. As he nears the top of the landing, Mother Bates emerges from the bedroom and stabs him. He stumbles backward down the stairs and falls to the floor, where he is set upon and stabbed yet again. At the hardware store, Lila and Sam have been waiting for Arbogast, who was supposed to return hours ago. Sam tells Lila to stay behind while he goes out to the motel. When he gets there, he calls out to Arbogast, but no one answers. Norman, standing by the swamp after just disposing of the investigator, hears Sam calling out to Arbogast. Lila and Sam go to Sheriff Chamber, who talks to Norman on the phone, but doesn't think anything is wrong. When Lila briefs the purpose of Arbogast's visit was to meet Norman's mother, the sheriff informs them that Norman's mother has been dead and buried for the past 10 years. But Sam and Lila find it hard to believe, because as per Arbogast's investigation, there is an old woman in that house, and Norman wouldn't let anyone see her. Back at the motel, Norman is worried about all the people who have been snooping around. After the phone call from Sheriff Chamber, Norman goes up to his house and voices his concerns.
Right here. This is my room and no one will drag me out of it. Least of all my big, bold son.
They'll come now, Mother. He came after the girl and now someone will...
Which leads to another unseen argument with his mother. The next morning, when Lila and Sam find out Chamber is not going to be of any use for them, they decide to go out to the motel by themselves and take a room, with a fake husband and wife identity. Norman assigns them to cabin 10, and on the way, Lila checks that the door to cabin 1 is unlocked. After they are sure Norman is not nearby, Sam and Lila enter cabin 1 to search for clues. Sam notices that the shower curtain is missing, and Lila finds a scrap of paper with something subtracted from $40,000. Lila asks Sam to distract Norman while she gets into the house and meets Norman's mother. Sam finds Norman in the office and engages him in conversation, while Lila goes into Norman's house and finds the desiccated remains of an old woman's corpse in the cellar. As Lila screams and turns away, the living semblance of an old woman enters at the door, wielding a large knife, blocking the only escape route from the cellar. Sam's timely arrival saves Lila. That evening, a prison psychiatrist explains to Lila and Sam that Norman had killed his own mother out of jealousy of her new boyfriend. He had then exhumed her corpse and kept it in the house. Norman then began to believe he was his mother. When he became interested in another woman, Mother would get jealous, and Norman as Mother would kill them. Sam and Lila understand the reason for Marion's death, as the psychiatrist explains. The film ends with Norman sitting in the police station, with his mother's voice inside his head, insisting that it was Norman, and not her, who committed the murders. Norman looks absolutely psychotic at this point. He grins up and we see a flicker of his mother's skull superimposed over his face. Then the film ends with Marion's car being winched up from the swamp.